and welcome back. We have been joined virtually this morning by members of the Belize Peace Movement. We have with us via Zoom Arthur Saldivar. He's an attorney at law. Good morning, Arthur. We also have with us this morning Paul Morgan. He's a founding member of the Vision Inspired by the People, VIP, and of course, he's also a member of the Belize Peace Movement. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Sani. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's begin, first of all, Paul, by discussing the role of the Belize Peace Movement in getting the process of the redistricting exercise underway. Beginning with the initial claim that was brought before the court a few years ago that is by and large the trigger for this particular process. Let's start there.
Okay. Well, as you know, this whole process actually started as far back as 2015. That is one of the reasons why I'm surprised that we're just here now. In 2015, the Peace Movement, VIP, all of the other bodies that joined this action, we got together and looked at what it is that we can do for our country to begin the process of development. And we identified the critical pillar of representation. In fact, in the VIP document, we identified that if people have proper representation, then they can begin to work together. Then they'll have national unity. When we have national unity, then we will embark on productivity. We'll begin to work with each other. If we begin to work with each other, then we will develop family life, a family life environment, because there'll be money, there'll be enough resources to go around.
Yeah. And
if we then have family life environment, then there will be social justice. So representation is the first critical pillar of democracy. And so you asked what the genesis of this matter. The genesis of this matter is that we out here, the people of Belize, see our path forward to national development, and therefore we have embarked on this process to begin to get our rights, our guarantees from our constitution that will give us representation.
So what I find to be interesting, and this is perhaps a personal observation, is the fact that while the claim was initially brought by the Belize Peace Movement, you had other interested parties join this matter, including the People's United Party, and of course, Lord Michael Ashcroft also joined as well. But it would seem to me that with the change of administration in 2020, and perhaps even before then, that the initial claimant had been overshadowed by the PUP. Is that a correct observation?
Totally wrong. Totally wrong.
Okay.
And I don't know why you say that. Maybe if you explain what you mean.
To say that it doesn't seem to me that enough was done by way of consultation with you guys. So there was a consent order, and that consent order would have, in a sense, determined the engagement of the BPM in this process. Is that correct?
The BPM and you have to remember now, I think the attorney will explain to you more.
Sure.
The Belize Peace Movement or nobody, not even the executive, should be able to tell a constitutionally constructed body what to do and how to do, especially how to do. We demanded that the Elections and Boundaries Commission present their proposals for reasonable redistricting to the National Assembly. Not even the executive should be interfering in that process, because the commission is a constitutional body. It has its own rights. It should work in its own deliberate judgment.
It's autonomous.
So when you say that we did not have input in the actual construction of the proposals that you see now, that is true, but that is not a fault of the peace movement. That is a fault of the commission.
Okay.
For since 2015, I don't know what these guys have been doing. This is what they come up with. Something totally irrational, but I'll leave that for another part of the show.
Okay. So the last exercise was done somewhere around the mid-2000s, right? And so it's fair for us to say that this process has been long overdue. This should have been something where within a reasonable time, the country, based on the population growth, should have been redivisioned once again, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so speak to us now from that perspective, where we're saying that, look, this thing should have taken place several years ago, given the fact that Belize has grown to over 400,000 persons.
Let me track back now to the years that have been neglected by the commission, this constitutional appointed body. In 2015, the VIP at that point in time wrote to the chairman of the commission, Mr. Pitts, who promised to take the matter on because we saw from then that this was long overdue. Maybe they required somebody to prompt them into it. They promised, Mr. Pitts did, may he rest in peace, promised that yes, we will do this. Governments came, administrations came, left, and nothing was done. So you shouldn't be surprised when I say, well, what has the commission been doing all this time? We have been at this for more years than this has been in the courts. So please, that is the credit, that is credit to those people who made the suit. Back in 2015, it didn't seem so urgent, but as we began to understand that these guys love their little enclaves, constituencies that are so small, and this is what gives them undue power, then we began to understand why our country is not developing properly, because power was in the hands of the wrong people, and it was not fair.
Is it the hands of the wrong people, or would we say that it's disproportionate?
When it is disproportionate, it is because it is in the hands of the wrong people.
Okay.
If the people were right, they would have recognized that. Right people recognize right things.
Go ahead, we're listening.
Yes. So so I am saying to you that all of this is the fault of those who are in the governance process. As you see right now, I'll say this, and nobody has to agree with me, but the proposal that we'll be discussing today is not the product of a rational mind or rational minds. I know some of those people on the commission, especially the public officers, and those people, she and he who I know are professional public officers, they would not produce something like this.
Okay.
This, in my mind, is mischief designed to kick the ball into the hands of the executive, who will patch and move it the way they want to, constitutionally, because now the ball is in the hands of the legislature. And who controls the legislature in this country? It is the executive. And so the
essentially you just answered the question that I asked initially.
Excellent.
The fact that this seems to completely overshadow the work of the BPM in terms of getting us to where we are at this point. You've essentially given me that answer. But let's move on a bit. Let's talk about the report now and bring Arthur Saldivar into the conversation. When you guys saw this document for the first time, I guess it's based on the consent order that it is also shared with the BPM. When you saw this document for the first time, what was the initial reaction?
The initial reaction when this document was first seen was that it was garbage. It was not worth the paper it was printed on because it did not in any way meet the requirements of Section 90 of the Constitution, which was for them to ensure that the distribution of the voting population was as near equal as possible.
Yeah.
This does not do that. As you've said, and in terms of the question that you've asked, Paul, whether or not the exercise has been overshadowed by the PUP administration, there are fingerprints. Is all over it. In fact, it has been so politically skewed that no person with any sense of objectivity could conjure to say that this document could be one that would have fairness be associated with it, should it ever be used in the conduct of elections in Belize. So we are back to square one. We are back to the same problem that the BPM sought to have addressed initially in this matter.
Mr. Saldivar, I want to plug in during this moment to then ask you, do you think that that is one of the primary reasons why they did not want to share this document with the media?
Certainly. Again, I believe that they should all be embarrassed to have even put this out into the public. But again, they are mandated to do so. The court order, consent order, that they agreed to dictated that by the 17th, today, they should have shared the document.
Yes.
The document should have been tabled on the 31st, but they are doing the tabling now. So they changed the timeline a bit, but at the end of the day, they were required to do what they have done. And this is a resounding F. This is a fail, for the Election and Boundaries Commission. Now, I must say that from the onset, the commission sought to do something unconstitutional. When they constituted a task force and delegated their responsibility to that task force, or the responsibility of the Election and Boundaries Department. You see, the commission itself executes the mandate of the Constitution. And in executing that mandate, they initiate exercises to ensure fairness in the electoral process. But it is the public servants who are charged with the responsibility to go out and do what is required to have the numbers be made nearly equal as possible. There is no provision in law for a politically dominated task force to do anything in regards to the electoral divisions and the voters' distribution in Belize. But Election and Boundaries Commission, either by their own agency or at the behest of others who they should not have been listening to, decided that they needed and required a task force. And in that task force, all they had were political hacks who abdicated their responsibility to do anything objective, but adhered and toed very, very closely to the party line. And this is what we have: the modeling of politics with no national interest in mind.
So here's a question. In terms of the legal process that brought us to where we are with respect of the report, interested party, I think it was on the part of Lord Ashcroft, who brought in an expert witness, and it led to the trend report, if I'm not mistaken. Was this taken into any, do you believe that this was taken into any consideration when they were formulating this report in terms of the information that was presented by Mr. Trend?
None at all. The trend report was only given when the lip service and some mention. I don't know who they.
It was fleeting. The mention of it in the report is fleeting, but I'm asking whether or not there was any consideration given to what this key expert had presented.
None at all. No, there is no evidence that Sean Trent's report was in fact followed in any way. Mr. Trent provided 3 configurations of the possible outcomes of this exercise, and none of those configurations are evidenced in what this proposal now portrays. So no, in my estimation, and in the estimation of all those who have discussed this matter with, there is no evidence that Mr. Trent's report formed any basis of this exercise.
So you've had an opportunity to peruse the report. You've perhaps formulated your own opinion as to where you stand on the report. You've given it a resounding F. What's next in terms of the BPM's role in all of this? Is there a challenge? Where do you go?
Well, the consent order is clear that where there is any breach in the part of the any of the parties, but in this case, the only party that executes anything of any note would be the Election Boundaries Commission. Where there's a breach and Section 90 is not adhered to, we have recourse to continue this matter to its conclusion, to have the court decide on it. And I believe that if this is what they insist on doing, this is where it's going to go, that the court will have to decide whether or not what they have put forward can pass muster constitutionally.
So I have another question for you, Arthur. So when you look at the population growth, as at March 2023, we're at 441,000 plus citizens in this country. Would it have been fair to say you would expand the number of constituencies versus keeping it the way it presently is at 31, but reducing the number of constituencies in Belize district? How do you look at that?
2 things. Well, 440,000 is not the number that we look at in determining the size of constituencies. Because 440,000 is basically the full measure of our population, including persons under the age of 18.
Yes.
Where this matter is concerned, we're dealing in the main with persons 18 years and above. And insofar as is important in the consideration and the exercise, it's of those persons 18 and above that are registered to vote. We have just gone through a re-registration exercise, which places each voter in the constituency where they live. At least that was the objective of that exercise, to ensure that persons are voting where they actually reside. In that situation, we have now 189,336 voters thereabouts, which would bring the median number, when using 31 as the denominator, 6,100 voters thereabouts as the average. Now, the international standard is that there be a deviation, that all the constituencies cannot really be the exact number, but the deviation goes 15% on the high side, 15% on the low side.
This is hovering around 25%, right? Which is fairly extreme.
It's hovering around 35%.
35, wow.
Because this new constituency of Ambergris that they have put there is 35% larger than what the median number that they have suggested would be. And in terms of the other divisions, there are those that are 25%, and they're all still severely malapportioned and outside of the international limit. The international limit is there as a guideline to ensure that when we are considering ourselves democratic and a democracy, that we come within it, so that the one man, one vote principle is given its greatest effect. We cannot have that with this that has been produced. And outside of that, what has been evidenced is that they have been trying to create garrison constituencies that their composition is being looked at mainly from a political point of view, to vote in one particular direction, which is one of the products of gerrymandering. And the other is that they've basically cracked the vote in a number of areas to disperse voters who they believe would be voting for a particular party. In terms of what is the consideration here now would be the opposition party. So they have dispersed voters from divisions where the opposition party would have normally been strong. And then they've gone and interfered with divisions that really had the legitimate expectation to be still on the rolls because their numbers were not malapportioned from the beginning.
So we're looking at Port Loyola, for instance, where that is one of the concerns that is being raised, that in terms of Port Loyola's configuration, it's well within the 4,500 threshold thereabout.
The 4,500, I don't know how they came up with 4,500. It's ridiculous. Barbados is a smaller country than us, and the average size of the Barbadian constituency is 7,000 persons. So why is it that we are looking at 4,500 when that is an unrealistic number? Again, the totality of the vote in Belize in terms of number of electors is 189,336 or thereabouts. So we should be looking at a higher number.
Yeah.
In terms of the median.
Mr. Selby,
yes.
I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what would you consider to be the constituencies that should be a part of the redistricting exercise?
All 31 must be a part of the redistricting exercise because the malapportionment is so severe.
I believe the question is which ones should be reshaped as part of the exercise.
If it were to be done by an objective standard, you'd start with the smallest and you work your way up from there. The smallest and the largest would have to be touched first. But you start with the smallest because here it is that we will have divisions where two can become one.
Yeah.
For example, you have Mesopotamia, Fort George. Those are two of the smallest. Then beside those, you have Caribbean Shores, Alberts. All right. Then you have Queen Square and Pickstock, and so on and so forth. You can basically go one for one in terms of areas that are traditional PUP, traditional UDP. And you look at those. You could basically have put Fort George and Pickstock together and form one division. Okay? You could have put Queen Square together and with Mesopotamia form one division. Or Queen Square and Cullet, or Cullet and Mesop. Whichever one you wanted to do, you could have done that. But you have to do it in a way that is objective, where you're looking at a criteria for interfering with those boundaries. And the criteria has to be you're looking at those that are most malapportioned on the low side, and those are most malapportioned on the high side, to first address those. And you work your way in.
So in this case, yes, continue.
And this is what the trend report suggested. This would have been something that would be able to pass muster because you are basically then, you're not looking solely on the political aspect, but you're looking at the malapportionment as being the basis for guiding the exercise. In this particular instance, the malapportionment was maybe the tertiary consideration, if a consideration at all. The main consideration here was how to manipulate the vote.
And that was going to be my statement after you mentioned that. Would it be fair to say that this exercise is a step in the ruling party doing this for their best interest?
Yes, this is squarely an attempt by the present administration to manipulate the numbers in a way that would benefit them to the detriment of any other entity that enters the political arena.
But what's interesting here is that they too have flagged quote unquote serious concerns with the report. So it would seem as if though there are those in the administration who do not necessarily go by what has been presented in the report itself. It flies in the face of convention or reason.
Yes, and to their credit, again, as I said, any right-thinking person looking at this document could not in any way conjure the suggestion that it was in any way objective. This is blatantly biased. There is no other way to describe it. It is obnoxiously biased.
Let's get Paul back into the conversation here. Let's get your take on what has also been presented in the report, Paul. I'm not sure if
as I previously said,
yes, go ahead.
it is built from a mind that is not rational in the direction of trying to build national unity. So if we look at it, I say it is mischief, total mischief.
Yeah.
It is the political, the officers who are government officers on that commission. I say that I believe they have been railroaded, because they wouldn't, I know these people, they wouldn't do something like that. They're more objective. I believe, like Arthur said, this is a result of putting politically driven persons to guide the commission against the mandate of the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't have any provision for that kind of thing. So, are we being led by honest people? Has the commission been hijacked? And my response to that would be, yeah, I think the commission has been hijacked by politics. And this time, it's good time for the people to begin to understand what it is we're facing together.
So let me ask this question, and I'll have both of you gentlemen respond to it accordingly. The opposition had flagged in the first instance the fact that a sitting senator, a parliamentarian in the upper house, is also a part of the task force, and the fact that they strongly believe that that in itself would have not only created a conflict of interest, but a particular bias. Do you guys believe that perhaps this is the result of what the opposition had foreseen to be something that is of concern there?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Again, I think it's a topical issue in the country right now, the whole issue of Portico. And what happened in terms of the opinion given by Ben Jorotowicz, where he basically spoke of the separation of powers doctrine and the fact that the executive cannot bind the legislature.
Yeah.
Now, this is just another manifestation of that. When you put a senator, a member of the legislature that has been appointed by the administration in a task force that is charged with the responsibility, well, that has been given the responsibility to do what a constitutionally mandated body should have done, you have already breached the separation of powers in so many different ways that you have totally distorted and perverted the characteristics of the democracy. So, by no means should Mr. Montejo have been allowed to be on that task force. The task force itself, again, is unconstitutional. And I hate to speak of it and give it any kind of justification, because there is none for it to exist. This exercise should have been one accepted by the Election and Boundaries Commission, where they delegated a team from the Election and Boundaries Department. In that process, yes, they could have had a consultant with the persons of the Election and Boundaries Department, But that consultant would have been someone who came on the merits as being an expert in the exercise. They had a number of them. You mentioned something earlier that the interested party brought his expert. No, the interested party that bring an expert. The interested party, when the matter was before the courts, recognized that there was a need for resources to pay someone who would be appointed by the court to act on the court's behalf, in allowing for the court to understand what the process entailed and how it should be done. There is no expert for a party in these matters. The expert works on behalf of the court. So a list was provided of 3 or 4 different professionals in the field. The parties in the action decided on one of those individuals. So the interested party had no idea who would have been chosen. When that person was chosen by the government and the Belize peace movement, then the interested party, and we are thankful to him in this respect, put his money where his mouth was. Nobody invited him to be a part of this action. He came in. And when he came in, well, he brought what he has as his calling card, the finances, and put those finances to work on behalf of the Belizean people by paying for the expert. And as I said, that expert was roundly ignored by the Election Boundaries Commission in its exercise.
Gentlemen, we're looking at this exercise that is obviously going to affect both sides of the ruling party as well as opposition. I don't think that there will be a way to please either one of them equally. In that vein, what happens next after this report is revealed and we are able to express our discontent or content? What happens next?
Well, this is the thing. This exercise should not be for the pleasure or displeasure of the politicians. And I believe, and the media needs to be on board with that. Because as members of the society, the principle of fairness and the weight of the vote is important to every one of us. We have seen how resources have been misused in this country. And when we have malapportionment, it is licensed to continue to misuse the resources of the country, where you do not have equal access by citizens to the kinds of services needed for development to occur. So this is tied directly to our people and their development, including you in the media. Because when you leave that studio, you go to your stores, you go to your homes, you go to your neighborhoods, you walk your muddy streets, your broken streets, and you walk in through neighborhoods that are infested with crime. Sad to say, the most severely malapportioned constituencies on the low side, the smallest ones, are the ones that are most riddled with crime. When these are the ones for which there's an unevenly yoked proliferation of resources, but the resources are not trickling down to the people. So there have been no benefit to those that are small from being malapportioned. And equally, there have been no benefit to the largest ones, like Stan Creek West, Belmopan, Cayo South, and others. In fact, both the largest and the smallest in the malapportionment equation have been misrepresented, disenfranchised, and disillusioned, because representation has not been there for them. Now you want to draw in others into that misery. You're going across the sea to bring in Kikaka.
Into Fort George.
Into Fort George. For what reason? It will be a malapportioned constituency in the next 5 years if that was to be done. Because you're talking about 2 areas that don't grow naturally. Where Fort George is losing voters and will continue to lose voters, Kikaka don't expand. The only reason you're putting them there is because that's a voting bloc that is almost assured to vote blue.
Based on its tradition, its voting history.
Has never voted for have never voted for the UDP ever in its existence.
Yep.
So that's the only reason. What Sean Trent in his report suggested was that given that San Pedro and Burgess Key grows so large, that you would split it. And this is the reason for this is because you have projects going on that island every day, and there are people coming into the island to live from the mainland on a daily basis. But that's not the case for Kikaka.
Yeah.
There is no justification for Kikaka to be dealt with in that way. And given that you have the numbers right there in the city to build up Fort George if you want to maintain it, then deal with that in the city. You have Pickstock, you have Caribbean Shores, you have Albert Division if you want to go across the river, right? You don't need to go all the way across the sea.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. So we're almost out of time in respect of this conversation. Any parting words that you guys want to share with us before we come to an end with this topic?
Yes, may I start the parting words?
Certainly, go ahead.
Today is a sad day for Belize as we traffic through this process of redistricting. But I cannot lament and encourage our people to lament what has happened. I think we need to encourage people to look at what is happening now and chart a way forward. What is the real problem we have here? The problem might not be redistricting in itself. The problem might be the interference of the political parties in the process of executing the Constitution. That is where I end. The political actors will not correct that problem. It is the people. The media is a part of the process. And I could tell you, you guys who work at the media work honestly, but I don't think that the Belizean media has been focused enough to turn the screws of national development, the critical screws I mean. Had there been more focus on this matter, more invitations like we have now, and I say thanks for the invitation, then I believe that it would have been harder for the political actors to screw up the whole process. But now they think everybody is sleeping. So wake up. Arise, ye children of Belizean clan, and let us look at what's going on with us. Let us act.
Well said. Are you, Arthur?
Well, Isani, what I will say is this. We had statesmanship in our political discourse in the past generations with George Price, Manuel Esquivel. Manuel Esquivel did this process in 1988. And there is a Hansard with that process and the debate that ensued. They did an objective exercise, and that exercise stands as a template that should be followed in this exercise. We will await to see how this iteration of the Belizean Parliament deals with this piece of paper that is being presented to it. I am hoping for statesmanship. That's my closing statement.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for giving us your opinion on the Belize redistricting exercise currently taking place. As you mentioned, and as we also mentioned, we will be following the story. We will be trying to provide as much information that we possibly can on our end as the media, and we thank you, of course, for your input as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will be joined by representatives taking part in the North American powerlifting competition. You don't want to miss that, so don't go away.